Hello, my name's Marco, and today I'd like to talk about one of the most obvious but perhaps overlooked facts about technology. That you have had to learn every single piece of software or hardware that you've ever used. And what's more, what that means is that maybe thinking deeply about learning and knowing more about the rich science and theory of learning that comes from educational studies over the last century can be an important theoretical lens to look at HCI. And over the years, HCI is an interdiscipline that's benefited enormously from different theoretical perspectives, whether it's Suchman and ethnomethodology, Laurel and theatre, Durish and phenomenology, and more recently Herc and some aesthetics, just to pick a few examples that have influenced me. And I think learning can potentially be as valuable a theoretical tool to look at HCI. Now, I won't have time to go through many examples, but I'm going to look at one, which is metaphor, one of the oldest concepts in HCI, which was introduced at the time of the early desktop interfaces, as they used them as a metaphor of a traditional desktop. But when you think about it, that's a little bit strange. I mean, these two don't really look anything like each other. And, there's a very big difference between using a physical desktop and using a desktop computer. And nowadays, is it even useful at all? Who's ever used a paper folder in their life? I'm 45, and yet I've hardly ever used one. That's something my parents used. Is it still relevant? I'm going to talk about a particular theory of learning, which is one of the most influential, called Constructivism, which I think can help us think about this. And this is the idea that learning is an active process, and in particular that it builds on existing knowledge. And now, in a modern perspective, we can think of existing knowledge as neural circuits. So groups of neurons in the brain that work together because they have strong connections. So what happens when we acquire some new knowledge, or encounter some new knowledge, is that a neural circuit will fire in the brain that is based on existing circuits, so existing knowledge. But as we encounter it more, then those firings together will strengthen new circuits that are specific to that new knowledge. And what that means is that new knowledge is being formed out of existing circuits, because that's all we have, but gradually adapted to whatever's new. What does this mean? This means that metaphor provides this kind of link to existing knowledge. So, for example, when I encounter a new desktop metaphor, then the metaphor helps me link that to circuits that are specific to a traditional desktop. Not the same thing, but that linkage will be good starting points for building new circuits which are specific to the new concept, the new desktop interface. And this newly built circuits can then provide a basis for learning new interfaces like the latest desktop, so that each, by having consistent interfaces, each new old interface is a metaphor for learning a new interface. And each time we're building on that prior knowledge. So I hope that illustrates how learning can provide an interesting theoretical lens. I'd like to throw out a few questions to you to think about how you might use learning in your work. So how does thinking about learning change the way you approach HCI concepts? In the paper I talk about how it's easy to assume that something like an affordance is innate, but actually if we think about it as learnt, we can really inquire at some issues about how universal it is, or how culturally specific. And what theories of learning could be useful in your research? So I've explained how constructivism is useful to understand metaphor. How can those learning theories influence your HCI practice? And how do people learn the technologies you study? Is it, in a traditional classroom? Probably not. It's probably in a complex social environment of the workplace or social setting. And lastly, in the paper I talk about how liberation pedagogies can help rethink the purpose of learning, not just about acquiring facts, but fundamentally providing liberation to the people that they're serving. And I think it's useful to take inspiration for this to rethink the fundamental goals of our work in HCI.